BBQ. Save those for the people who deserve it. The volunteers and staff, those guys work a lot of hours. Before we get too far, I want to make sure I thank all our sponsors. I'm going to just read down this list real fast because it's a long one this year. We've got Microsoft, HTC, Samsung, Spiro, Swappa, OnePlus, Cyanogen, xda-developers, xda-TV, NVIDIA, SmartBear, Android, Etch, Oppo, I said that right? Oppo? Evernote, Huawei, Nissan, Ginny Mobile, Vinley, Pre-Launch and Epson, Filmnado, Spur, Mediafire, Chaotic Earth, Pixel and Print, and Red Bull. Red Bull will be here tomorrow night in a big way. Then our media partners, we want to thank Android Guys, Android Central, Fandroid, and Android Headlines. That's it. So, round of applause for all our awesome sponsors and media partners. Thank you. Yeah, we couldn't do this without all those guys. It's really, really important that they come out and keep supporting this event so we can keep doing it. I'll keep this short so we can get to the people who you're really here to see up here. I know we've got some things going with tags not scanning right now. That will be working by the end of the day. Our badges got here a little bit late, so we didn't get all that set up right away. So be a little patient with us. We'll get all the game working, and you'll be able to scan and earn all the pins and challenges and stuff like that. So just be a little patient with us. We'll get it going, and everything will be working great. Tomorrow, you'll forget any of these problems happen. So with no further ado, I'd like to introduce all these awesome guys. We've got Rito Meyer, Chet Haas, and Timothy Jordan from Google speaking for us today. Thank you, guys.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Big Android BBQ. My name is Rito Meyer. I'm joined on stage by Sir Chet Haas and Timothy Jordan, Esquire. That was a cue to applause when we start throwing things at you.
Just note that the lollipop sticks are sharpened. Just to make it fun.
So me and Timothy are developer advocates on the developer relations team. Chet, as many of you know, is a software engineer on the framework team. And we all work at Google. And we're really thrilled to be here at the 5th Big Android BBQ. We'd have come sooner, but every year at Google we like to celebrate the first Big Android BBQ at around this time every year by having a major Android platform release. We like to celebrate it in a big way. And of course, this year is absolutely no exception, but a 5th anniversary is kind of a big deal. So we wanted to do something special. We thought we'd come out. Yeah, that's a good start. But even more, we thought, you know what, we'll do our release as we do every year. And this year, especially for the 5th Big Android BBQ, we will launch Android 5. So as you now know, it's called Lollipop, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that later on. In fact, we brought Chet, one of the people who wrote it, to come up and talk about it. That seemed fitting. But first, I wanted to make up a little bit for being so long in coming by squeezing 5 years worth of keynotes into the first 10 minutes of this presentation. So bear with me as we get through that. We know that we're all here for 2 reasons. First and foremost, because we're passionate about Android. But also, of course, because we're passionate about barbecue. Now, I've enjoyed barbecue since before I can remember, but Android, that I can remember a little bit more clearly. It all started in 2007 when the first Android Beta SDK came out. Got the opportunity to see what the future of mobile can be. But it really took off for me almost exactly 6 years ago in 2008 when Dan Morrill, who was a developer advocate at the time, handed me my first Android phone, HTC T-Mobile G1. How many of you all had one of these phones? Yeah, it's an old school crowd. Anyone still using it as their primary device?
Well, special pin if you were.
not surprising, right? Things have changed and have moved on really quickly. It's only been like 6 years, 5, since this was a device that you could use. But since then, the Android family has grown incredibly quickly. There's never been a larger selection of devices for pretty much any kind of thing that you want, and they're all running Android, which is really exciting. Now, I'm sure that you're all already familiar with the wide array of new Android Wear devices. Timothy's going to talk a little bit about that later on today. And just a couple of days ago, we released the latest Nexus devices as part of that range, including the Nexus 6, the 6-inch quad HD display, dual front-facing speaker, quad-core 2.7 GHz Snapdragon processor there in the smartphone. And the Nexus 9 tablet, which is a 64-bit, 8.9-inch display. Which seems, I guess Nexus 8.9 didn't quite have the same ring, but nonetheless. And of course, the Android player, or the Nexus player, I should say, our first Android TV device. So how many of you guys are thinking of getting one or more of those last three when they come out on pre-order? They're pretty slow. When do you get to? So it's clear, we've come a long way in a short time, and it's not just with the hardware. I mean, when the first big Android barbecue happened, it was basically an awesome Android-powered tailgating party back in 2010. And today, it's one of the world's biggest and best community-driven Android events. Now, to put all of this into perspective, when the first big Android barbecue was being served, all of the phones at the event were running Froyo. Now, since then, there have been 6 new major named platform releases, culminating in Wednesday's release of Lollipop. And at the same time, the app ecosystem has grown just as dramatically, if not more so. When Android Market was first launched, there were 50 apps for you to download and take advantage of. And today, of course, it's over 1 million apps, all available on Google Play. And that just represents just the enormous scale and speed at which the ecosystem has grown. Now, when an ecosystem grows that quickly, it can be hard to keep up. Now, I know this because I've built my whole career around trying to be the guy who learns all of this stuff first when it comes to events like this and shares it with developers. But it's gotten harder. Now, back in 2007, that meant you could spend a late night or a weekend learning the entire SDK and writing a blog post. And that was pretty much all you needed. A couple of years after that, had books, which got increasingly bigger and fatter and longer to write. And these days, you need a whole team of talented engineers just to go through everything from the core platform enhancements to best practices to things like Google Play services, performance, gaming, user experience design. All of this stuff is required now to really know how to build something great that's going to stand out in an ecosystem that has over 1 million apps. So what does that mean to us as developers? How do we know what we're supposed to focus on, which sections we're supposed to go to, which parts of the SDK we're supposed to learn? Well, I've spent a lot of time on stages like this, talking about easy tips and tricks, pro tips to helping to build better quality Android apps. But we all know that building a really great mobile experience these days on any platform is hard. It's not easy. There aren't simple tricks which you can use to suddenly become successful. But then again, hard is relative. And let me talk about my standard for hard. So for me, writing code in one of these, which is floating on the ocean somewhere around here, for 6 or 7 weeks at a time with no internet access, with 7-foot swells crushing over the back deck, that's hard. Growing up in the 90s, thinking that this is a cool way to spend a Saturday night, that's hard. But I know that the engineers in the room here are all talented and hardworking, so for you guys, building Android apps isn't hard from an engineering perspective. After all, learning new APIs is kind of what we do. And Android Studio has been getting bigger and better, making the tooling and the development environment easier. So everything is moving in the direction of making it easier from an engineering perspective. But what's always been hard, and continues to be hard, is finding the opportunities to invest your resources, figuring out what is the best thing to learn. How do we decide what to do and when to do it? What is the right point on the adoption curve to get involved? Now, in 2008, Android was kind of in the engineering equivalent of being pre-IPO. Success was anything but guaranteed, so developers who chose to invest on the platform were taking a big risk. This could be stuff that never went anywhere. We end up with 100 apps in the Android market and no one cares. All that time and effort is wasted. But as a trade-off, that relatively small amount of engineering effort in the early days paid off big in 2010 when Android really went public. With the Motorola Droid, the Nexus 1 both coming out, suddenly Android was a thing that people had. You no longer had to explain what Android was to people before you got into that conversation. Now today, of course, the ecosystem is a lot more mature, as we've discussed. So if you want to have those same returns, you need to find a way to increase your risk. So if you want those big returns, you need to either invest more, or you need to invest early on something which isn't already a guaranteed success. It's the same for us when building the platform itself. How do we continue to grow Android where we've already got such a successful platform? And you can see the way that we've done this. And it's the same thing for app developers. The way to spot that opportunity is to focus on users. And the way that users identify you doing that is that they see something of quality. So for us on the Android side, on the platform side, that means investing really significant engineering efforts on broadening the base, making Android available to more and more devices, and making sure that the experience on those devices is the best that it can be. So that means everything from making the UI buttery smooth, to making sure that the platform is small enough so that it can be used on a huge variety of devices, from wearables to smartphones, which have lower capabilities than some of the top-end stuff which we're seeing come out on the Nexus line, to having significant improvements in battery life. All stuff which users find important, things which are exciting to people which actually use these phones and devices. Not to mention, of course, building an entire new design language to make it look beautiful and consistent across all of the different platforms that Android now runs on. So for us as developers, that means looking for opportunities to build a better experience for our users. So for the remainder of this keynote, that's what we're going to do. We're going to look at some of the latest Android improvements and opportunities and highlight what we think of as investment opportunities, places that you can put your engineering efforts now in order to get the best possible return on that investment. And what better place to start than with a review of the APIs available in the latest L release, which we can now happily call Lollipop. And of course, that means getting a much better understanding of probably the biggest change to the platform, which is material design. Now, the material design language is really based on 4 foundational principles. The goal is to create something that's engaging and behaves and reacts like a real physical material. That means creating tangible layered surfaces, making aesthetic choices that are bold and striking, and making objects and screen elements move in a way that helps users understand changes and directs their actions. It's really about helping people understand what's going on the display by having things move and shape and react according to direct user action. It's also important, of course, to make sure that everything we do is adaptive. With such a wide variety of different devices, you need to make sure that anything you build is going to look like it was designed for whichever platform users are actually running the apps on. So what underlies all of this is this material metaphor. It combines the idea of a virtual space and a full system of motion. And it's all inspired by the ideas of ink and paper. And that gives it a really tactile feeling and something that's real, while still providing opportunities for magic. And that means that, just like in real-life objects, surfaces and edges need to offer visual cues that make it easier for people to understand how they're supposed to interact with the app that's running on these devices. Things like realistic lighting that shows scenes and divides space and indicates moving parts. All of this really helps to draw user attention towards the most important screen elements. And that all works towards making it easier for users to understand how to interact. But it's important to remember that we're not tied to interactions that are also possible in the physical world. We can create new interactions using the same physics and realities that are consistent across that platform. So it all looks really cool, but the big question is, how do we actually implement this stuff? It's all coming in very hot. So I figured the best person to ask about this is one of the people in charge of helping make it happen. So I'm going to hand over to Chet Cummings.
The chair was really comfortable. I was thinking just stay there. Talk from over there. So first, it seemed useful to find out how many people are actually developers in the room. Can we do a little poll here? Okay, keep them up. 1, 2. I count about 37. All right, so we'll record that. Good, because some of the stuff we're talking about in the keynote, as well as some of the talks that follow on, are actually kind of for developers. Keynote, fairly high level, we'll get the concept across, but if you're a user and you see some APIs flash on the screen, it'll be okay if your eyes glaze over. That'll give me an excuse. It means that you're not a developer and just bored by what we're saying up here. So we wanted to talk about some of the ideas, not just of material design, but actually how they're implemented, how they work, and more importantly, how you can use them when you're writing your applications. So this is the kinds of stuff that we did in the framework team and the toolkit team to actually make the stuff work, but we did that so that applications could build on it to give you experiences like that. So let's step through some of these ideas. We'll talk about material theming, some of the new widgets that came online in L, and some of the new APIs that you can choose to use if you would like to, if you want to dive in deeper into material design. Also, somebody asked online yesterday, I think, said, okay, well now that the name is announced, Lollipop, can you tell us what you were calling it internally during development? Because they're always looking for secrets on Android development internals, because it's so exciting there. And I had to admit, we could come out and be public about it. Internally, we called it L. So first of all, material theme. This is the first and most important way to actually opt into the material design experience. You say theme equals android.material. And that gives you some things out of the box. It'll give you the color palettes and default widget behavior, things like touch feedback ripples. It'll auto-opt you into activity transitions if you choose to use those in your activities. It'll give you a lot of the new icons, basically the look and feel, sort of the bare minimum look and feel of material design for the standard widgets, standard windows in your application. And then you can choose to go further into material design by using some of the custom widgets that we've come up with. So who in the room has tried to use used list view? It works quite well. All right, everybody, and how many people enjoyed it? Good. Me either. It's hideously complicated. It's really good at what it does. It does a very important job of basically doing things as fast and as reusable as possible, because you're still on a mobile device. You want to fling that list, you want it to go really fast, and you want to be able to replace views without creating a lot of garbage on the way. You want to do things very, very quickly, but that makes it a little brittle to do things like nice, smooth animations. So then we end up doing, what, 10, 20 tutorial videos, dev bites, teaching people how to do all this stuff with List View. Wouldn't it be nice if you could get that stuff for free? So we built something new called Recycler View that gives you a lot of capabilities out of the box. Just like List View, it has Recycler, Adapter View capabilities, but it also has pluggable capability. I keep hearing cell phones go off. This is the downside to speaking at a mobile conference. Is everybody's got like 5 devices on them, and they're all going off the entire time during the conference. So I'll just try to ignore that part of it. So it's got all the list view type capabilities, but it's also got pluggable capabilities like the ability to plug in a different layout manager. So no longer are you hostage to the, yes, this list view scrolls vertically, and that's it. If you want to scroll horizontally, you could, I don't know, rotate your views. So instead, we actually give you a linear layout manager that can scroll horizontally as well as vertically. We've got a grid layout manager and a staggered grid layout manager. More importantly, you can build your own custom layout. Whoa, excuse me. Turns out swallowing is hard sometimes. You can build your own custom layout manager if you want. We also give you built-in item animations, so some canonical, simple actions on the Recycler view, like removing and adding items, will actually animate by default. You can customize the animations as well. Another widget that we're giving you is Card View. This is a much simpler one. The main reason it's there is to give people a consistent look. It's actually really easy to build your own card. It's just a frame layout with some views inside of it. But this allows you to have consistent look and behavior to other applications that are using the widget. And more importantly, both of these widgets are available in the support library. So you don't have to, yeah. Let's hear it. Give it up for Support Library. It's the framework for people that don't want to use the framework. So these are available in V7, so have at it. If you are running on a device that has L on it, you'll get a slightly different capability, so card views will actually be using real-time soft shadows. If you're running on previous versions, it does something else to make it look pretty good. It's not the same capabilities, but it does what it can, so you get a nice looking feel for it anyway. Stepping on, so we've also got new graphics APIs. A lot of this stuff was done simply to make the standard widgets work, and you don't actually need to use these in your application to have a material design application. But you can use these APIs if you want a more advanced experience. So real-time soft shadows is a bear to get working, but basically we now have, in addition to the normal X and Y, the layout position of views on the screen, we also have a Z position. You can basically boost that view into the volume above the view hierarchy, and it'll cast a real-time soft shadow from a local area light source down on the view hierarchy. More importantly, it'll do it in like real time. You can still get decent frame rate, because we had people working really hard on some serious optimizations for this stuff, just to get this nice subtle look to everything. You also have the ability to shape your views and your shadows, so that's how card view works, for instance. We've got this nice round corner on the cards. Those are clipped to that shape, and the shadow is also using that outline shape so that you get a shadow that's not rectangular for a view that is not rectangular. And Rado's going to talk about other designing stuff. If you clap, then that means I'm done, but I'm not. So just don't even bother.
I don't want to be awkward. They were clapping
For you?
No, the code, not you personally.
You clap the code, that's all right.
Okay, so the thing about a design language is that it's kind of easier to show you what it looks like than to talk about it. So I'm going to try and let the examples speak for themselves as much as possible, which is a struggle for me because I do like the sound of my own voice.
Me too.
Ultimately, though, the goal here, as you can see, is to try and use deliberate color choices, edge-to-edge imagery, large-scale typography, and intentional white space to create an immersive user experience. I've also learned that I need to learn a whole new vocabulary to be able to talk about design. It's the same core elements used in print, in print-based design. So typography, grids, spaces, scales, all of these things, which designers in the print media have known about for a long time, is now becoming more and more important in app design as well. It also includes things like the use of immersive contextual imagery to do more than just look good. It's there to create hierarchy, meaning, and focus to help, again, make functionality more obvious. And you'll see that's a recurring theme in everything about material design, is to try and use these things to make it more obvious to users how they're supposed to interact with things on the screen. And that makes it easier for us as developers to create much more advanced user interfaces, things which aren't familiar through the widgets that we've been using for a long time, but actually make sense in and of themselves. And color is a big part of that. And you'll notice that material design apps don't shy away from these big, bold, bright colors. And they can really be used to emphasize your branding and the visual identity of the apps that you create. And that can work particularly well when the content itself influences the colors used by other visual elements. Like you can see here. Check and tell us a little bit about how that works.
So one of the most important changes in the area of color for the L release was the ability to actually skin and brand your application much easier. So to date, you had to do this basically by producing a bunch of PNGs. You're creating bitmaps of the appropriate color, and you're probably producing them at different resolutions and different form factors and different colors for the different activity states of your application. So now, all the standard widgets come with these grayscale assets, 9 patches or shapes or whatever, and the ability to tint them. So by setting the colors in your theme, the colors over on the right of the slide in your theme, you automatically tint the grayscale assets, and the standard widgets are going to be in the color that you want. And then you also have the ability to develop your own standard assets, which again should be white or grayscale, so that you can get the auto tinting there. So if they respond to the same theme attributes, then they're going to get the same branding experience. Much, much easier. We also have yet another support library. Give it up for support library, people. Yeah, go for the applause break every single time, no matter how cheap. So we have the new capability in the support library, developed by one of the folks on Rado's team, that to extract colored data from images and use that as dominant colors in your UI. So you can dynamically send in a bitmap and say, tell me about the colors in this image, tell me what the primary color is, some of the contrasting colors, and then you can set some of the colors. As you can see in this sort of simple demo app that I wrote, you load in that flamingo picture and pass it into the palette library, and then you can set some of the background and foreground colors automatically and dynamically based on the images. This makes it much easier to use full bleed imagery and bitmaps all over your application, and then have the UI dynamically respond to those images to give a much richer experience for the user.
So that brings us to the third element of material design, which is animation. This is really a huge thing. It's one of the things that is most striking and obvious when you start to see some of these material design apps in action. And the whole concept is designed so that every visual change and user interaction reinforces the idea that the user is the root cause of any changes that happen within the app. And the entire material, the UI itself, reacts accordingly. So that means that even simple actions initiate changes through motion that can transform the entire design. So it's a transformation of the app's environment rather than a transition to a new screen. So the days of sort of hitting a button, hitting an element on the screen, and then firing up a new activity and everything just switches out its changes is gone. Now everything is a transition to a new state. And you can see in this example, you click on an appointment and it zooms out to provide the details. It's very clear that your actions have resulted in this new state, and you can see that transition all the way through. So no longer are users in a situation where they have to kind of question to themselves, did I hit the right thing? Is this what I meant to happen? Everything flows from their interactions directly. And the result is motion that's meaningful. It serves to focus attention and maintain that continuity. So the way that the things move can give users clues about how things should work. And because the eyes are naturally drawn to motion, animation can direct user focus. So for this example, if the player controls of a primary interaction piece, we can use animation and movement to point that out to the user. This is the thing you should be paying attention to. This is the thing you're most likely to want to touch. And you'll notice that even small interactions can radiate outwards, making subtle changes to the UI. Nothing happens instantaneously. Everything happens as a progression from that initial interaction. It's a total departure from that instantaneous world. I mean, the whole design, as we've been saying, is around trying to make it more obvious, what did you do to cause this change, and what should I be doing next? Chad, I know animation is a thing close to your heart, so I'll let you take it away.
More animation capabilities in the platform? Sign me up now. So this was probably one of the areas of the most effort and most API surface in the release, and the most difficult to accomplish for the various things that material design required. But it's pretty awesome in the end. So we have there's a bunch of different areas, but I wanted to touch quickly on three of them. One is activity transitions. You saw some demos in the mocks in Rado's slides. The ability to actually transition between activity windows, which is possible in Android, and we've even done a dev by tutorial video on it, but it ain't trivial and it ain't obvious, and it only works in some specific situations when you're launching into a sub-activity. What we did was build API and functionality to allow you to have a seamless animation between activities that may not even be in the same process. So there's a whole way of relating the information about how you want to animate items out, how you want to animate items into the new activity, and how you want to animate shared elements between the activities. So we can see on the right, I created a little brief, little seizure-inducing demo over there. So you can see we're animating that item up. You've got some touch ripple feedback going on at the same time, and then it launches into the new activity. We're animating the old ones out. They're cross-fading. There's a bunch of customization. There's also more advanced transition animations that we have built into the platform that you can use by default. But this whole infrastructure for handling the ability to basically hand off elements between activities and animate that to help the user understand how they're transitioning from activity to activity. We also have new animation curves in the platform. It was possible using the animation framework to have motion paths on the screen or to write custom interpolators that had Bezier paths for more interesting timing capabilities. We built that into the platform, so now it's much easier to create curved motion, both time-based as well as space-based, on the screen. So much richer animation capabilities in core animation APIs. And finally, the animated reveal, which if I stop the seizure animation on the left, we can see the reveal on the right in the unrelated demo. As we do this circular reveal from, you hit the floating action button over on the right, and then we reveal some other view behind it. Again, transitioning the user, relating the action that they're taking on the screen to an animation that takes them to a new activity, a new state of the application. We also have touch ripple feedback, so again, trying to give the user feedback when they do things on the screen. Normally, in previous releases of the Android platform, you would click a button and it would show you the selected or the pressed state of the button, which was nice, but wouldn't it be nice if you could actually animate that behavior instead and give them a little bit more information about what's going on? So if you look really closely, I think, no, I don't know. It's really hard to see on the screen. It's very subtle. Run it on your devices when you get out. It'll give you not just the ripple feedback that sort of emanates out, but it emanates out from where the finger pressed. So it's not just a state that's on or off. It's an animated behavior that transitions between the states. There's a few different capabilities in icons that we enabled as well. Stateless animator, the ability to actually move things to different states. So not just the touch ripple, but you could actually boost the elevation of views, so you could give them shadows along the way and animate that behavior. The ripple drawable, which you can use on custom views as well as the standard views, like the one that we have there. And animated stateless drawable is also another way to animate states. So you could have an icon that actually animates between its different states using PNGs that is basically playing a keyframe animation for along the way. There's some other stuff I wanted to go through really quickly now, and then move quickly on to the next section of the talk. So we have heads-up notifications. This is kind of a cool thing. Previously, if you got a phone call, it would take over your whole screen, which may be what you wanted. On the other hand, maybe you wanted to finish your game level before you answered the call from your wife. I don't know. This gives you the capability to make that decision dynamically. So you get a heads-up notification for some of these standard things that were happening in the system. If they wanted to take over the screen, then maybe we're going to show you a heads-up notification, and you can have a rich notification to take some action based on that at the time. And we'll just move right on to the next one, which is notifications on the lock screen. This is a tricky issue from a security standpoint because it's really nice to take the phone out of your pocket and see the information that you need to know about without actually having to unlock the screen and go into the device and run the application or pull the shade down or whatever it is. So wouldn't it be nice if it was actually on the lock screen? However, would it be nice if your corp account wasn't showing confidential emails on the lock screen at the same time, unless you don't actually like that job and you wanted to get fired? So we came up with a somewhat involved system of allowing the developer to tell the application how to publish notifications and what privacy settings they should have, and then having the user also opt in or out of various settings. So we have the public information, so an application can say, this is public information, it's okay to display on the lock screen, or this is private information about the activity that should only be available if the user has actually logged in past the lock screen. So we shouldn't show that. And then there's this other area, there are lots of different animations here. Let's click. There's this other area that's in between where maybe that's private information, but you'd like to show some version of that information on the lock screen. It's not okay to show what the message was from that corp account, but it is okay to show that you have a message in the corp account so that then they can make the decision to log into the device. And then finally, there's a secret area that just says, no, never show this unless they're actually logged in. So there's APIs around that stuff. Recent documents and tasks. In previous versions, you would have the tasks that you had run, and those would all be the top level things that you would see in recents. Now you can actually have a task like Chrome, but the separate tabs actually show up as separate documents, and you can actually go to each one of those separately. You have the ability in your applications to do that as well, so now all of your sub-activities aren't simply under the same task, but you can opt into having them be essentially different items in the recents list that the user can choose to go to directly. Art is pretty huge. I don't know if anybody played with that when it came out in KitKat. It was an optional runtime. You could opt into that and see that hopefully your application didn't crash when you ran it. Now, not only is it the default runtime, it's the only runtime. Because we worked on robustness, we worked on performance, and basically it is the future of runtime on Android. So much better capabilities, and much better capabilities going forward as well. It gives us a better starting point for more performance improvements. But already it's given us huge gains in particularly garbage collection, which is one of those things I care deeply, deeply about. Just in the way that it arranges the information, storing large objects somewhere else, so it doesn't have to crawl through those to allocate space for small objects, the ability to actually collect and move things around when applications are in the background, makes it a much more robust runtime in general. So check that out. Project Volta is about getting more information on the battery. Rado mentioned this earlier. There's tools and utilities that you can run to get information about different processes under your device, or hopefully your activity, and make sure that you're doing the right things in there. So check out those utilities. There's a bunch of stuff that I do not have time to go into. There's the enterprise capabilities, so managing user and device profiles. There's OpenGL capabilities. There's OpenGL ES 3.1. There's also the Android extension pack, the ability to detect not just a particular extension for OpenGL, but a suite of extensions that all come together. So we've worked with partners to say, here are the capabilities that we want you to have to get into this basket of things. So when that's online, then you detect that that's there, then you can depend on a whole suite of things. So OpenGL ES 3.1 is both for NDK as well as Java bindings, wrappers as well. Job scheduler, the ability to run things on the device at convenient times. I want to do this thing when the device is idle, when I'm connected to the network at some later time. Much more robust capabilities for not draining the battery by waking up too often and trying to do things that you really shouldn't be trying to do right now. Storage access framework, the ability to actually work directly with directories instead of just individual files, as well as detecting media directories, which was a fairly large use case for it. And other capabilities in Bluetooth and multi-networking, security stuff for SE Linux, et cetera. The docs will be up soon, and you can check out all information about all these and more. And I think I'm going to pass it over at this point. And now I'm done.
Thank you, Chet. And as he says, the SDK for the actual non-preview SDK will be available later today. Along with all the documentation. Oh, will be available later today. Nailed it. All that rehearsal finally paid off. And when that happens, you'll be able to update or upload your L versions of your apps. Lollipop versions. I need to get used to saying lollipop. The lollipop versions of your apps to the Play Store.
It's actually sucker with a silent L.
That makes more sense.
Yeah.
So the last thing about material design is adaptive design, and that means making sure that your app is designed and optimized for the device that it will be running on. And as we know, there is a huge number of different devices. So at this point, I would like to hand over to Timothy, who's going to dive in and explain how that works in a world of increasingly diverse Android devices.
Thank you, Rado. So I hope you enjoyed the introduction to the keynote. And we're going to get to we're going to be here all day, folks. Okay, so UI is really important. And I'd like to start with there, but go a little bit further and talk about a bit bigger of the picture, and that's the entire user experience. Computers used to look a lot different. They used to fill a whole room, and when you sat down to work at one, that's what you were doing. You were working. But today, technology works for us in more places than just work, and it fits into our lives, right? It assists us, and it entertains us. But it's not perfect just yet. Now, this is often our relationship to technology today. It gives us a lot of value. but we're often adapting our lifestyle to the technology that we use, which is the reverse of what it should be. It's a heavy cost, and we pay it frequently, but what if we didn't have to? This is a photo I took of my team a short while back playing a word-guessing game with glass, and what I love about it is that you can hardly see the technology involved, right? And it turns out with wearable computing, less really is more. It's where developers and designers get to put the user before the technology, right? It's briefly there when you need it, but not when you don't. It gives you what you need and gets you back to your life. It's this simple core philosophy to wearable computing that you see over and over again in terms like micro-interaction and glanceable information. And you can easily see this design philosophy in glass, and in Android Wear watches, and well, in all these new form factors. In fact, this is the common element across all of these devices. It's the specific way that they fit into our lives. Put it as simply as possible, the user experience should feel effortless. This idea of effortless design binds all these new form factors together. And there's another thing that does as well. Android. And this is the easy part, because there's two things I know you're all passionate about, as we learned earlier. You're passionate about BBQ. Yes? This is what you say yes. This is an interactive talk. I'm not going to do this alone.
Yes.
What's the other thing that you're passionate about? I'm going to do this again. We're just going to rewind. There's two things that I know you're passionate about. One of them is barbecue, right? And the other one is Android. Thank you very much. Second time's the charm. Got it on the first try. Okay. And we're going to take a closer look also at the design and the platform sort of specifics of each of these products. Now, the developer documentation goes into a lot of detail, and if I were doing about a presentation on any one of these, I would go into a lot more detail. Instead, I'm just going to highlight a couple of the top-level items, yeah? Just so we can kind of have a survey of the different specific design aspects and platform aspects of each of these products. Does that sound like fun? Yeah, I wasn't kidding. There's a lot of slides to get through. Okay, Android Wear. For design, I want to just mention two quick things about Android Wear that I think are really important and specific to this device. The first is glanceable, or glanceability. Classic wristwatch is designed for you to see the time in like a split second, right? You can almost see it out of your peripheral view, and your user experience on Android Wear, more than just the time, it all should be about that. Just a simple glance gives the user what they need. The less time it takes to use your software, the more time they can be present in whatever they're doing, and in fact, the more value they'll find in it because of that. It should be fast, it should be sharp, and it should be immediate. The other thing is that it should be relevant, right? Wearable apps are aware of the user's context, the time, the location, the physical activity, what they're doing right then. And you should use that information to provide a better user experience. It should matter to the user right then and there doing what they are. It should be timely, it should be relevant, and should be very, very specific. So those are a couple design highlights for Android Wear. I'm going to give you some platform highlights. There's two ways to develop for Android Wear. The first is notifications. The notifications on your phone can also be displayed on your watch, and to get this, you don't have to do anything. That's awesome. Also an applies to you. You can get enhanced notifications as well, and they'll show up on the wearable. Again, wait for it. Are you ready? You don't have to do anything.
Did we throwing out lollipops at that point? We promised from the queue, but we didn't get from the queue.
Ooh, caramel apple pops. These are the good ones. Got it. Okay. And you can also do stacks, pages, and replies. That's notifications. This is how you get started in wearables, and I have to say, it is the easiest platform to get started in wearables out there. The other thing that you can do is apps. And for this, there's 3 aspects of the platform in addition to your standard Android programming that you need to think about. Sending data between the phone and the wearable, custom UI on the wearable, and of course, voice actions. A little bit more detail about each of these things. The connection between the phone and the wearable is provided by Google Play Services. It gives you 3 items. One is the Node API that lets you know when the devices are connected and not. The Message API, which is really great for remote procedure calls. And of course, the Data API, which is buffered and synced automatically in the background for sharing data, including large assets such as images between the phone and the wearable. That's the Data API. Custom UI. The custom notifications are available, which allow you to create a notification on the wearable, right? And when you do that, you can make it look very, very specific on the wearable. Now, we recommend in general, if you can, to issue notifications on the handheld and have them synced to the wearable automatically for you. But if you do want something that looks very specific, you can of course make these custom notifications. You should know they aren't synced back to the wearable, so you need to handle that yourself. There's also an unofficial UI, shall I say, support library.
Yeah! Support library!
I think they're getting more enthusiastic about support library, which is not what I expected. So this is an excellent library for doing wearable-specific UI things. For example, you might want to do a long press to dismiss, or maybe you want to inflate a specific layout on a rectangle screen versus a round screen, or perhaps you're doing something like this that you see on the screen now, where you're trying to keep content within a box and you want stuff in the corner that's visible on the square and on the round device. You see how that box gets centered into the round device so you can see everything. So it was really great for allowing you to do those wearable-specific UI tricks in a really easy way. And finally, voice actions. There are system-provided voice actions that are task-based and specified within the temp filter. There are app-provided voice actions. These are app-based, and they're specified pretty much the same way as a launcher icon. And of course, there's free-form speech input. And this is using the speech recognizer activity. It's just going to work the way that it should on the wearable. Notifications and apps. 1 down, 3 to go. No, this is fun, right? Okay, so Google Glass. I want to mention again design and platform specifics about Google Glass. The 2 things I want to mention about design that you really need to consider when you're starting to approach this platform are, first, that it should be so easy that it feels familiar. It's like these voice commands, right? You're asking in plain language for what you want. It's not like this experience. Cabbage at 3 a.m. Who does that? Right? That would be a terrible experience, but it's important to point out this anti-pattern because you don't want to surprise the user. And these are devices the user has throughout the whole day. So you need to make sure that you provide an experience that's sort of what they expect. And not unfortunate and awful. This is another example of a UI that, well, this would be very familiar on the phone, but it isn't so easy that it's familiar on the glass. This is actually an early experimentation by the Glass team into UI on glass. The thought was, what if we put a dashboard of information on glass that was there all the time? Would that be a cool idea? Turns out no. Not a cool idea. It's too busy, it's too overloaded, it doesn't give the user what they want and back to their life. The other thing I want to mention is you have to test everywhere. And this is so true for wearables. You know, Android Wear and Glass share a lot of the same design philosophy. This is one of those things, and you can really see it with this image. We actually have this styrofoam head, a camera in one of the eye sockets, you can put on glass, you can test it in different environments. It's incredibly creepy. But it allows you to test things like this, where what does this photo look like for the user, both indoors and outdoors? And you would initially think maybe it's a brightness and a contrast issue, but it also appears to be a color temperature issue. It's just dramatically different. You need to test your application and the user experience in all the environments that your user uses them, which is not just at your desk doing development. You get up and walk across the street and see what happens. Right? Hopefully it was safe the entire time. It wasn't. There's some changes to make. As far as the platform, the two things I wanted to mention. First is Android Wear. Android Wear notifications launched on Glass this week.
Yay.
We're really excited about this. It's great news for developers because you're going to build with Android Wear notifications, and if you use it as a watch, it works great there. If you use it as a glass, it works great there. You don't have to do anything different. And they will display on the wearable the way they should on that specific wearable. Right? On Android Wear, it's going to show like an Android Wear notification, and on glass, like a glass notification. If there's enhanced notifications, it's going to show those, again, through the appropriate menu UI on each device. You can also use stacks, pages, and voice replies. So again, easiest way to start doing wearables. You can also do apps that run on glass, right? And do really in-depth stuff. Like this is one of my favorite examples of a glass app, or as we call them, a glassware. This is word lines on glass. And if you just look at something in another language, it'll translate it in front of your eyes. And this is using all sorts of fun things in the Android platform. The way the GDK was built was on Glass platform features are rewritten so that they work in a Glass-specific way. And then there's also some additional libraries that allow you to do Glass-specific things. The platform features that you might be using are like the location provider, the camera intent, the recognizer intent, or the options menu. All of these things you build in the Android typical way, but they work in the Glass specific way. And there are some add-on features as well. Things like the voice trigger or the card scroller that really only make sense on Glass, and these are sort of Android style classes, but specific to Glass. So those are the two elements of the Glass platform I wanted to talk about. Now on to some things that are even more new. Rado talked about this, both this and the next topic. It's very early for these products, but it's a great time to get involved and start thinking about how to design for them and even to start building for them. The first of which, Android TV. Now, Android TV had some big news this week. The Nexus Player was announced, and it's going to be available for pre-order on the 17th, which is today, in case you were wondering. Now, it's a really cool device that does streaming, does gaming, and it's even Google Cast ready. For the design aspects, two things I wanted to mention. The first is that it should be fun and easy. TV should be fun and easy. This is simple and easy to understand. Think of it as a casual experience. You want to optimize for activities that put content at the center of the experience. Think movie watching, immersive gaming, or just hanging out with friends in the living room. These are the experiences that you're designing for on TV. It should also feel cinematic. Right? This is not a small screen. This is not a glowing rectangle that you pulled out of your pocket. Right? This is hanging on the wall. It's big, probably 10 or more feet away from the viewer. You want to design for as little user interface as possible and as much content as possible. It's all about content. That's what users are trying to get to on the TV. You want to avoid things like on-screen text. Who in here previously thought that they were going to write a book reader for the TV? Wayne. You're on the right track. That's excellent. It's just a lot of text doesn't make a lot of sense. A lot of spending time looking for things doesn't make a lot of sense. You want to tell your story with pictures and with sound.
On the other hand, they wouldn't have a lot of competition.
Don't listen to them. Well, except for the earlier part. That was great. That was really great. Recommendations and apps and games. So for the platform elements I'm going to highlight here, first, recommendations. The recommendations row has a central feature on the home screen. And it allows users quick and dynamic access to content. Essentially, it's a bunch of cards that represent, say, a system app or action, a notification, an activity, or even a piece of media. And your app can provide suggestions for the recommendations row to help get your content noticed. And to do this, you only need to extend the intent service. For apps and games, this is Android programming, right? Using L, we write for Android TV. There are a couple differences that make this a lot easier. First, you have to declare your TV app in the manifest. This is a TV app for the user to be able to install and use it on the TV. And there's a couple support libraries. The lean, this is going to be another talk a month from now. I'm going to do that. Nobody's going to clap. It's going to be really awkward. Anyway, the lean back library, right? It provides user interface widgets for the TV. Think browse fragment, details fragment, search fragment. You don't have to use it, but it makes creating UI specific to the TV really easy. So there's no reason not to. There's also the secular view library that provides classes for managing displaying long lists. And I would recommend you include the leanback library, the secular view library, and the v4 support library all together. The latter two are required by the leanback library, so you might as well just start with them. And that's the Android TV platform. So let's talk about one more, shall we? Android Auto.
Yeah!
It's super early, but hopefully you'll have a chance to build on this soon. Now, I've only got a few highlights here, but it's enough to start thinking about that, and you really need to, right? With all of these form factors, that's the biggest thing that you can do. The platform is easy. It's Android. The challenge is the user experience design of your app on the new form factor, right? And that couldn't be more true for Android Auto. The platform is really unique, so there's a lot of opportunity, but it's a very specific opportunity. Let's talk first about the design. First, you want to think about this as naturally integrated with the car experience. Android Auto should feel to the user like an extension of the car, an extension of their driving experience. Think about blending the user's app experience with the in-car experience, if you will. Enhancing it rather than replacing it. And it works best if the user just seamlessly goes from the instruments of their car to the UI. The other thing that you'll think about is there's really a handful of points in here that are like really car-specific UI issues you would only have to deal with there. But they make sense, right? And think about this next time you're driving somewhere around here is what are the things that you assume about the experience in your car, about your instrumentation, or about your sort of media controls. And remember that those are the things your users are going to assume about the experience for your Android Auto app as well. And one of those is day and night transitions. This is really simple, but you might not have thought of it unless it was highlighted. You need a color scheme for day and a color scheme for night. And Android Auto will switch in between those for you, depending on the time of day. For the platform, it's really simple how it works. You just simply plug your phone into the car, and then the phone services are available to you while traveling. A couple highlights on that platform. One is the media UI. It's awesome and it makes a lot of sense in the car, specifically thinking about music apps, podcasts, live radio, even audio-based news. Your app runs as a media service that exposes content through browsing and playback APIs. And the service provides content to the Android Auto app, which takes care of the rest. There's also voice actions. Android Auto supports these for interacting with compatible apps and services. And apps can respond to the voice actions they're interested in, say playing a song or taking a note. As Android Auto, again, it's very early here, but I really recommend that you start checking it out and thinking about how your app can make driving even more fun. One last, One last point I'd like to leave you with. We should never forget, especially with these new form factors, that we're building for people. Seems obvious once you say it, but it's really, really important to remember all the time. Consider your service in their lives and how you can help them have richer experiences when they're having adventures or when they're pursuing their dreams. In situations like this, let's try and make our user experiences for these people truly effortless, especially in these situations. Thank you so much.
One final point, because I'm a frustrated marketing person. Android where? Android there. Wasn't that worth it?
Yes.
Support library.
We just wanted to throw things at people. I hope you don't mind.
I guess this is a
What if you
really lame way to
try
launch
throwing a
stuff.
handful? That's right. Watch out. Heads up. All right, get along. Where are we going? Yeah. It's not bad. All the cool kids.
I think we're done.
We're done. Thank you so much.